to this mirror match. This is the third quarterfinal of the top 8 of the 2023 USA National Championships, the biggest national championships of all time. It is time to get into this game. As we heard, Evan Herndon as the second seed, electing to go second, giving Michael Hamilton the play here. Gonna go ahead, load up that Findall Spring Tunic with an energy counter, load up with Voltaire, and immediately go ahead and fire the Heat Seeker. Evan must have passed priority on that rather quickly.
And pitching a Codex of Frailty here, now that is a pretty big tell because you really don't mind playing a Codex of Frailty even if it's turn 0 just to give your opponent the Frailty token, which can represent up to -2, -3 power on their attacks. So the fact that this is pitch is telling Michael Hamilton has something a little more disruptive planned for the rest of the turn, and I wonder whether Evan Herndon caught that and is playing around it, expecting something more disruptive coming out compared to the Codex of Frailty that's in the pitch zone.
Well, that's a very good point because here's something very disruptive indeed. These are 3 Frostbites on the stack, and Evan electing not to respond with Voltaire and break those Frostbites because
not
able to. And one of the cards he blocked with there was a blue Ponkage.
Yeah, so this is an incredible start for Michael Hamilton. Definitely just turning the whole going first disadvantage, turning it on its head, telling Evan you have 3 Frostbites in your deck that has fewer blues, but Evan says, you know what, I'm playing through this with 3 of a kind. Now, a matchup like this, it can go to fatigue, given that this is a Ranger Mirror and neither side has a weapon that they can use for damage directly, but at the same time, you are not guaranteed to see these power cards that you pitch, so you will see these power cards come out as soon as you draw them, except for the one Codex that Michael pitched because he had to because of resources.
So now Evan has drawn 3 of those critical blues that he alluded to wanting slightly more of early in that Frostlock, in that Searing Shot, and then the one that headed to the graveyard on the first turn. This 3 of a kind, of course, massive here to be able to continue this first turn beyond the Frostbites, but not paired up with the Rain Razors, having to go on the first turn of the game off a 0 arsenal turn. This might be among the best case scenarios you could hope for when you're facing down a 3 of a kind in the Lexi Mirror.
Definitely. This is just a bit more of a stopgap. It looks like maximum 2 arrows on a 3 of a kind turn. That is not what you want. You definitely want to get to 3, maybe 4 arrows on a 3 of a kind turn. Just 2, as Evan's saying, is a bit of a concession he had to make because of the 3 Frostbites that were given to him by Michael Hamilton.
Yeah, talk about Evan. You heard him in the interview saying, listen, I just want to draw well. And when your ratios might not be exactly where you want them, a little too few blues, a little too many 1 costs, sometimes it comes down to those 4 cards coming off the top of the deck in the order you want to see them.
Definitely, and critically, because it's open deckless, both sides know exactly how many blues the other person is playing. Michael Hamilton knows that Evan has exactly 16 blues in his decklist, and Michael Hamilton, the caliber of the player that he is probably tracking those. He's saying there's 1 blue in your graveyard already, there's 2 blues in your pitch zone. How many more do you have? My Arctic Incarcerations, my Winter's Bite. He does have an extra yellow Winter's Bite in his list as well. All these cards are going to be way more impactful now because that is quite a few of your blues of the few that you have already being used in your first turn of the game.
This Remorseless coming in off 3 of a kind, got go again, 5 damage attached to it, but the on-hit of the Remorseless, very critical here. If it hits any action card played by Michael Hamilton, is also going to cost him a life in addition to whatever other resources are going to be played here. Remorseless, one of the most threatening arrows in this matchup along with Withering Shot.
Definitely, and on-hits are really the name of the game here. And that is the reason you see both players representing Purge Grapplers. Now, Snapdragons would have been obviously the more offensive option, but because of cards like Remorseless, because of cards like Infecting Shot, Heat Seekers, all these arrows very critically come at the 5 power breakpoint. So Purge Grapplers, along with a 3 block from hand, the Purge Grapplers ends up being equivalent to almost 1 whole extra card because you get to stop on hits, like you were talking about, like Remorseless, Infecting Shots, Heat Seekers, which oftentimes on hits themselves represent a whole extra card's worth of value.
So that Bolton Shot being committed to the block, Michael Hamilton taking 2 damage, going to 38, and now if he wants to play any action cards on his turn, going to cost him a life as well. This Heat Seeker coming in for 6, Heat Seeker getting +1 off the Voltaire here. Now listen, this is pretty face up from Evan. This is 6 damage, but the on-hit here threatening to give Evan a 5-card hand where otherwise it would only be 4, which is infinitely less threatening for the Lexi player to deal with, but that's going to take a couple more cards out of Michael Hamilton's hand. How much tempo does he want to give Evan on these blocks?
And coming back to the Heat Seeker on here, that's exactly what you want when you start with 3 of a kind turn, because this was a concession he had to make to play a 3 of a kind in the first place, and if he played it and ended this turn without an arsenal, that feels like a very, very underwhelming 3 of a kind. Just 2 arrows and no arsenal, that is the most concession of a 3 of a kind ever. So let's see whether Michael Hamilton respects his Heat Seeker and stops that. Looks like he is opting to use the Hornet Sting, whiffing on that on one of those Winter's Bites, the extra ice cards that he has teched for this matchup, kind of hurting him here, going to the bottom. And yeah, looking like he's covering up the Heatseeker, but lost that Hornet Sting pretty early in the matchup and didn't get the 1 extra damage from it.
Critically using one of the couple times you can block with equipment as a Lexi player here. Remorseless going to be online. Now, I'm pretty sure only effects cards played, like action cards played, so the
Yes.
Lexi flip here not going to cost a life, but this Arctic Incarceration is going to be the turn for Michael Hamilton. We're going to flip with Lexi, give a Frostbite, 3 more Frostbites on the way. That Arctic Incarceration going to ping him down to 37, but now for Michael Hamilton, he set himself up with a 5-card hand. Evan's having to stare down 4 Frostbites on his own turn and no cards in Arsenal yet, so Michael Hamilton basically in this exchange that we've seen, positioning himself to force Evan into a place of having a pretty inefficient turn so that now Michael Hamilton, on the turn following, will be able to crack back rather nicely.
This was incredible sequencing from Michael Hamilton, choosing to block, knowing that he could represent 4 Frostbites, and that 4th Frostbite feels so much more than when it's simply just 3 Frostbites, because there's a whole extra card you need to pitch if you want to, do anything. So amazing sequencing from Michael Hamilton. That's exactly what you want to do when you want to give your opponent Arctic Incarceration, because if you send arrows and they block, now your Arctic Incarceration feels a lot weaker because you aren't actually making them pitch a whole bunch. They already use some cards to block. But over here we see Evan needing to pitch 3 cards to send his Endless Arrow. But once again, credit to Evan here. Even the previous turn cycle, we saw him send the Heatseeker with no cards in hand, meaning that on hit is actually very, very relevant. And once again, this Endless Arrow, he's sending out no cards in hand, saying, if you don't give me 2 cards on this, 1 card in Purge Grapplers, I'm going to set up an arsenal, and we already talked about how critical that arsenal is. Very, very needed to send 3 arrows in a turn.
Evan Herndon unable to play off an arsenal to start either of these turns, but commanding some blocks from Michael Hamilton. And when you can get the Lexi player to block with critical arrows, that has to feel like a win when you're the opposing player.
And once again, going back to the open deck list, Michael Hamilton has used 2 of his 3 Arctic Incarcerations, and we've seen how powerful they can be in this matchup. Evan still has 2 of his in the deck, still floating around somewhere. Michael Hamilton knows they're going to come at some point, but again, Michael Hamilton keeping Evan off that arsenal, saying, no, you will not get that, and showing a Codex of Frailty, one of the power cards that really gets to flip the tempo in his favor, which he has been, he's been blocking a little bit more than Evan has, so let's see whether he can use this to actually firmly get the tempo in this matchup.
So now a couple red cards here in the hand and a couple red cards blocked with, so not a lot of resources for Michael Hamilton to work with on this turn cycle. Gave that infecting shot along for the blocking cause there. This is going to be a bolt and shot coming in with go again off of the Voltaire activation, but no floating. We do have the tunic up critically on a turn that we're almost for sure going to play that Codex, meaning that infecting shot we just blocked with might be coming along off this Codex.
I was just going to bring that up. That was an amazing blocking decision by Michael Hamilton, putting a very threatening 1-cost arrow in his graveyard from the block so that he can get it back with the Codex, paying for it with the tunic.
Now, yeah, a couple options there. We see the Withering shot, we see the Infecting shot, and we see that Heatseeker from earlier in this turn, or in this game. A lot of options here for Michael Hamilton to work with off of the Tunic. The Heatseeker, a very relevant on hit as well, going to get you that 6-card hand, but without something like the Snapdragon Scalers, you got a Heatseeker activation and a card in your arsenal. All of a sudden, that might be a little tricky.
Definitely. Oftentimes, if a Heatseeker hits an arrow and you pond it into another arrow, you might just skip the arsenal, meaning that the Heatseeker on it didn't really do much for you. But I do want to go back to Michael Hamilton's blocking decision, critically pitting Evan off the arsenal, which means his Codex of Frailty forces Evan to discard a card and potentially let an on-hit through. So once again, Michael Hamilton showing us the amazing blocking decisions, putting the critical 1-cost arrow in his graveyard in the form of the Infecting shot, denying Evan an arsenal so that he gets disrupted by the Codex of Frailty. Just absolute masterclass of a play from Michael Hamilton here.
Tunic being used to throw the Infecting shot. Going to buy 2 more cards. Another blue card hitting the graveyard for Evan. We're going to resolve the Ponder now off that Codex of Frailty. Evan now sitting off only 1 card and the arsenal that he grabbed off that Codex, but a Frailty himself to work with. Going to tick up that Tunic. Let's see how he wants to play it. That card from the arsenal just going to be a Falcon when flipped up. We might be just seeing a setup turn here from Evan. No, he has a Codex of his own and a Tunic on 3 of his own. He's going to come in with a Withering shot. It's going to be coming in only for 4 because of the Frailty token, but another threatening on hit, going to buy a couple cards or maybe that Perch Grapplers if Michael Hamilton needs to block this.
Yep, and going into your turn with 2 Frailty tokens, you might have a full 4 or 5-card hand. Looks like there's a Rain Raises in Michael Hamilton's hand, but 2 Frailties basically just completely nullifies the Rain Raises. It actually just says, oh, okay, you're just using it to bring your cards back up to the original value, but that is not where you want to be as Michael Hamilton. And to Evan's credit, when Michael Hamilton played the Codex of Frailty, he said, all right, you know what, since I I have my own frailty token. There's no point for me to go wide. I'm going to block out, conserve my life total, hit you back with this Codex of Frailty, and there's just this amazing dance of tempo going on between these two amazing Lexi players.
Yeah, I was about to mention this has not been explosive fireworks. This has not been rain razors into three of a kind. This has been blocking. This has been careful. This has been tempo back and forth. And just really it feels like both players here are jockeying for position. They're trying to set themselves up to find the first big turn, but it's a lot of blocks and it's a lot of careful play from both of these incredible players.
And that's why the tech that both these players have against each other really comes into play. You're trying to jockey for the position, like you were saying, but then it's cards like Codex Ifriti, cards like Withering Shot, really a card that found its way into Lexi lists after she got really popular. And as you're talking about the tech between these two players, Evan has one extra red withering shot in his list compared to Michael Hamilton. Michael Hamilton has 2, Evan has 3. But of course, Michael Hamilton does have the frailty trap. But look at this. This is why he allowed the 2 frailties to get in. He said, I'm just going to play from hand. I'm going to play the 1-off CNC I have in my list. Now, both players have CNCs in their list. We do have their list here. They both have CNC. However, the first player to get that in their graveyard now has a whole other host of codex lines open to them. Because if you have the resources, you can codex into a CNC. And if you could set it up that your opponent doesn't have an arsenal, they will be forced to arsenal something, discard a card, and have to deal with that CNC on hit.
Both players continuing to jockey for position here. That Command & Conquer is going to buy the Hornet Sting and the Perch Grappler. There was an arrow revealed off the Hornet Sting block for Evan, so Michael Hamilton taking that 1 ping, going down to 35. We're going to flip over the Winter's Bite for Evan here, present the Frostbite, then present that Winter's Bite. Time to take a card out of Michael Hamilton's hand one way or the other. It's either going to the pitch or going to the graveyard.
And Evan using the armor here just tells us how aggressive he wants to be on this turn. Now, this is the first turn that Michael Hamilton hasn't given him 3 to 4 frostbites or a frailty token. So this is the opening he thinks he has found, where he's saying, you know what, just a CNC, but no frostbites to speak of, no frailties to speak of. So if I just give you 1 card in armor, I get to keep 5 cards, and I get to start with a frostbite into a winter's bite. This is my opening. I'm going to take it. This is how I'm going to jockey for position and hopefully keep tempo the rest of the game.
Both players here have been desperately trying to establish that 2-card arsenal. This was the first turn of the game that both players started the turn with 2 cards in their arsenal. Now, Evan on the offensive here, going to have the tempo to try to pressure Michael Hamilton. Going to be a drill shot headed to the pitch zone. How does Evan want to continue the turn? That frostbite going to make all the calculation for Michael a little more challenging. Time for a Voltaire activation into a hamstring shot, which is, again, not in every single Lexi list we're seeing these days. This is going to be 5 damage, and if it hits, the next arrow is going to cost an additional 1, almost like a second frostbite.
Exactly, and it actually says next attack, so that means even if Michael Hamilton had, say, another CNC or something, that would end up costing 4. That'd be a whole 2 extra cards. So it looks like Michael Hamilton forced into a bit of a blocking position over here, and I love the play sequence that Lexi has access to, which is you flip over an Ice Card, a Winter's Bite, and it gives them a Frostbite, and you play Winter's Bite, so you tax them on your own turn by playing the Winter's Bite, but they'll be taxed on their turn because of the Frostbite. That is just such an amazingly efficient play that Lexi has access to.
The fact that both players here sitting at 35 in the quarterfinals here of the top 8 in the national championships with multiple turns, both players have used their tunic. We're on turn 4 or 5 of this game. It really felt like it was in some ways defined by Evan electing to go second and then Michael having the potent disruption in that Arctic incarceration. Evan also not choosing to respond to even the frostbites at all by loading the Voltaire. Couldn't go wide through those frostbites. That first turn, the ripple effects from there are leading to this moment we're watching right now.
And that is exactly how the mirror goes. It is somewhat snowbally, but both sides also have ways to kind of completely stop the snowball in the form of the red Arctic incarceration, in the form of the double frailty tokens that we saw Evan just put on Michael Hamilton. Now, Michael Hamilton is in a bit of a pickle over here because I believe Evan has another codex in his hand. So with the frostbite, with the frailty that is presumably going to give Michael Hamilton, he's representing a little more disruption. And the reason why it's a little unfortunate for Michael Hamilton, you called it out, the double arsenal. That face down card is a Rain Raises.
Yes, it is.
And if you want to play that, you want to go wide on a turn that you aren't really disrupted, but it looks like he took that hamstring shot and he's going to get codexed here. So you really don't want to play a Rain Raises on a turn like this, but when it's in your arsenal face down like this and your other card is a non-go again arrow, he might be priced into it, or he might just go for a Lexi flip and send Infecting and put something else next to it.
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead, take 2 damage now off of that hamstring shot. The Remorseless being committed to the block, so there's a Frostbite on the field. The next attack costs an additional 1, but now it's time to grab the Remorseless out of our own graveyard here. If we are Evan off of the Codex, it's time for a Remorseless after Michael Hamilton just gives a quick little check at the graveyard. This Remorseless, again, it really does seem like, if you're Evan and to us watching here at home, it looks as though Michael is attempting to stay aggressive on the turn. So for Evan here, he's saying, all right, listen, how many attacks attacks, how many cards you going to play this turn. This Remorseless going to threaten to ping you for 1 every time you do so.
And Michael Hamilton choosing to block here, it looks like. Yes, he's blocking and he's saying, you know what, with this Rain Razor in my arsenal, you've presented so much disruption here that it's just not worth for me to try and go wide. I'm just going to preserve my life total. Hopefully you can't disrupt me later on, and I'll be able to come back at you with a Rain Razor's turn. And now I really want to commend Evan's decision to keep that Falcon Wing in his arsenal. He could have just sent it for an extra 3 damage, but he hasn't seen a Rain Razors yet.
Yes.
And since that is basically a free card to just leave face up in your arsenal, you might as well hold it, and if you draw into a Rain Razors, you got 2 extra value from the Falcon Wing. And that's exactly what happens here. Just being really rewarded for the patience of leaving the Falcon Wing in that arsenal, but Michael Hamilton saying, I'm countering a Rain Razors with that one-off Frailty Trap.
That was sick. That was so cool. Calling out the Rain Razors right as it comes, but there's that one of Frailty Trap on a turn that Rain Razors has been played. Rain Razors now becomes, instead of +2 on the turn, just +1, cutting the value of that card in half. Bolton Shot here now. Still gonna have power greater than its base, so is gonna have go again. So the Frailty Trap almost crucial to turn this turn off, but because Rain Razors does get +2 instead of +1, the turn is not over. This is exciting.
This is very, very huge. And the reload here, 3 block, easy for Michael Hamilton to deal with, but he's already devoted 1 card to blocking. If he wants to do this, once again, he has a Rain Razors in his arsenal. He wants to present some threats. He wants to pivot off of the Rain Razors, but Evan seems to just not be letting up at the gas here.
And sniffing out that, again, without the Snapdragon Scalers, it's sometimes hard to give a card reloaded go again off of the Bolton Shot trigger. So Evan having to think if he wants to reload off this Bolton Shot trigger, might just elect to keep the cards in his hand to use that incredibly powerful activation on Voltaire, giving the go again to keep this turn going wide on that Rain Razors.
So this is quite risky for Michael Hamilton, because if Evan has an ice card, remember, he has not activated Lexi this turn yet. Critically, because of the Falcon Wing being face up there and the Bolton Shot just having go again naturally, he didn't need to activate Lexi. If he has an ice card, he could flip it to give the extra frostbite from Lexi's ability. Looks like that is just another arrow he's putting in, but there was a bit of a risk that Michael took to try and pivot off the Rain Razors. That's been sitting in his arsenal for quite a while now.
Evan almost loaded there off the reload, but then elected to take it back before any game actions had been taken. Hadn't even really put it in the arsenal yet. Now just going to come in with the Bolton Shot. Instead of 7, this is 6. Once again threatening that reload, but because of the Frailty Trap, this only takes 2 cards if Michael Hamilton wants to block, which he's been doing a lot of. But look at this. It looks as though Michael Hamilton might be getting ready to take it. He's got aggression of his own, and this is just damage still.
I think especially since the first Bolton Shot did not incur a reload from Evan's side, Michael Hamilton saying, okay, look, if you're just sending vanilla damage at me, at some point I have to take damage to pivot, and I want to pivot on the turns where you're sending vanilla damage at me, rather than damage with on-hits in form of Heat Seekers in the form of infecting shots. Oh, Withering Shots. Even.
So this is another 6 points of damage. If this hits, a -1 defense counter can go on any one of the equipment there, and that's a really important decision for Evan to make. Do you turn the Perch Grapplers into a 1 block, making it still be able to cover a breakpoint, but different math has to be taken into account? I want to also point out how much value has that one Frailty Trap gotten on this turn. Did it block for 6 or 7?
3 from itself and 4 arrows being reduced, so 7 total. Amazing. But on the flip side, the Rain Razors here buffing 4 arrows, it looks like, so that is 8 value on the Rain Razors, so both players really getting about the maximum value you can expect from their cards here, Rain Razors and the Frailty Trap. Now coming back to Perch Grapplers, that is being threatened here. We talked about how critical that is to stop the 5 power breakpoints, because those are the really, really threatening arrows. You know, Heat Seekers, Infecting Shots, Withering Shots especially. So if that -1 goes on a Perch Grapplers, Michael Hamilton won't have the option of just putting Perch Grapplers and a 3 block to stop one of those critical 5 blocks later on. Now Heaven ending this turn without an arsenal, which means he is vulnerable to a Codex.
We do see a 3 of a kind in Michael Hamilton's hand here. We do see the Tunic being loaded up to 3. If you're going to take a bunch of damage, it's because you have a 3 of a kind to be played. And guess what? You don't have to play the Rain Razors first. You want to know why? It's already in your arsenal. Let's hold it back. You know, we can be. All right, it's fine. Here it is.
Definitely, because if you didn't play the Rain Razors, he would need to play the Infecting Shot without going in. Unless he pops Perch Grapplers. Now, Perch Grapplers does have an activation on it, and on a turn where you play 3 of a kind, you might be overflowing on resources. That could have been the line, but of course, he's valuing the block on that, and he drew enough red arrows, so he's saying, I'm going to play out the Rain Razors, I'm going to play out Endless Arrow. Evan over here not blocking. Very, very heads-up play. When your opponent has so many cards in hand, the on-hit of the Endless Arrow not so threatening. In the end, it just becomes extra damage, extra vanilla damage, because they already have enough cards to arsenal at the end of this turn.
This game has been a story of two halves so far. The first half really being the jockeying for position, incremental points of life and damage, and now all of a sudden we're swinging haymakers. That's two endless arrows being hit for 12 total points of damage. Both these players now absolutely throwing massive shots. It's time for a Quiver of Rustling Leaves activation, hitting a three-of-a-kind off the top, so we're only sending the Infecting Shot here. That Quiver was a way to make this turn go even wider, but otherwise, it looks like the Infecting Shot's the only way we're going to be continuing.
So Michael Hamilton getting a bit unlucky with his Quiver and his Hornet Sting.
Yeah.
Hornet Sting also whiffing on the arrow over here. But that is one of the trade-offs that Lexi has to make, because all those non-arrow cards, they are so premium, but you also want so many of them. There's the 3 red Archer Incarcerations, there's a Rain Razors, there's 3 of a kinds, there's a Codexes, there's a Premeditate that we see in his hand. So, you know, all that being said, like, yes, those Hornet Stings, those Quivers might whiff, but critically, Quiver of Rustling Leaves does say that if it didn't succeed, if it didn't find an arrow, it doesn't get destroyed. So we might see that come into play again later on.
So it looks like Michael Hamilton deciding which card he wants to pitch, going to keep the Tunic around for something. Now, we do know, everybody now knows, us at home, here in the booth, them on the table, that's a 3-of-a-kind on Michael Hamilton's deck, so both players taking that in consideration, but here's another 5 damage from this Infecting Shot. This has been, again, a tale of two halves in this game.
Absolutely. Now, one thing, Infecting Shot also, honestly, just more vanilla damage. That was coming, it looks like it was blue Infecting Shot coming for 5, so plus the Blood Rot. It's just 2 more damage. It's still not stuff like Endless Arrow on a turn where you aren't threatening an arsenal, where it's a whole extra card, or cards like Heatseek, or cards like Withering Shot, which would really, you know, reduce the power of Evan's turns. He's saying, you know what, I will take some vanilla damage. I had the life lead. I did go second. I did manage to incur a life lead from doing that, but now I intend to put you on the blocking position first before me.
Absolutely, and the other thing about the way that Michael Hamilton took all that damage, it did keep Evan off of an arsenal. Evan is now working off of a 4-card hand where Michael, on the turn that he has took all this, you know, he's attempting to have all the pressure, he has an arsenal and a 3-of-a-kind in his hand and his Tunic, so he does have the ability to block on this turn, save a bunch of life on something like this really threatening Infecting Shot once you're below 20, and still utilize maybe that Tunic, maybe a card in hand to play the 3-of-a-kind, refill your hand, and put the pressure back on Evan.
That's an excellent point. A 4-card hand from Lexi usually just threatens 2 arrows unless they drew something like a Codex, but I believe we've already seen 2 Codexes from Evan's side, so, you know, the last one somewhere in the deck, but, you know, a bit unlikely. Michael Hamilton playing the odds here a little.
Michael Hamilton sitting at 17, facing down an Infecting Shot 4-5. It's got go again. Evan Herndon at 18, the second seed in the tournament here, looking to take down and knock out the reigning national champion. This is about as good as it gets. Looks like we're going to be lining up a couple cards here to block with. Remember, that 3-of-a-kind on top of the deck from last turn is ready and raring to go for Michael here. This Lexi Mirror is going to come down to 2 blocks, 4-5. Total, gonna block out that Infecting Shot, utilize the last resource to load up this Remorseless, and we've got the Tunic to throw it off, so a 5-card hand for Evan to start the next turn. But before we even think about that, here's 6 damage and the Remorseless on hit.
This Remorseless is an amazing punish for the 3-of-a-kind that Evan knows Michael Hamilton is holding on to, because the 3-of-a-kind itself is going to ping you for 1 from the Remorseless if it hits, plus any arrows that you want to send. And we talked about this earlier. When you do a 3-of-a-kind turn, you want to send 3 arrows for that to have felt worth it, and that means his Remorseless is threatening an extra 3 to 4 points of damage out here.
This is very exciting.
Yeah.
I will say, for a Lexi Mirror, that can sometimes feel like, this matchup can sometimes feel like, oh, what this is just, you know, people throwing cards at each other and nothing really matters except who draws what when. This has been incredibly intricate, jockeying again for the different positions within this game to reach this point, as that Remorseless hitting going to take Michael down to 11, and now this 3-of-a-kind drawing 3 cards but bringing him down to 10.
Definitely, and yeah, if he sends more arrows, it's going to be more and more pinging from the Remorseless. It's draining your life here. And I do want to point out that as we reach this end state, both players know about all the disruption that the other side has already used. Michael Hampton, blocked with that 3rd red Arctic Incarceration, has already used that Frailty Trap, the one-off Frailty Trap. That means Evan knows that he's quite home free for quite a while. No more of those pesky Frostbites from Arctic Incarcerations, and no critical Frailty Trap. This opens up a few lines for him, like starting a turn with a Bolt-in Shot given +1 from Voltaire, because knowing that he doesn't need to worry about frailty traps anymore.
Looks like that's just the premeditate there in the arsenal for Michael Hamilton. So once again, most likely only 2 arrows coming out on the turn. Now, here's very interesting. This is going to be an infecting shot for 5. Going to take Michael Hamilton for 3. Oh, it's just the blue here. So not nearly as threatening as Michael Hamilton wants to see, and didn't commit the premeditate to this. So this is 3 damage coming across at Evan, threatening the blood rot, but Michael Hamilton had to go to 9 to play it.
Yeah, and not playing a premeditate here, I think it's a very heads-up play because that would ping yourself for 1 from the Remorseless, and also the Ponder, not very useful right now since you just play a 3-of-a-kind hand and have an excess card. Honestly, Michael Hamilton getting slightly unlucky, drawing 2 non-arrows of the 3-of-a-kind in the form of the Winter's Bite and the Codex of Frailty, so forced to pop the Quiver here, only finding another blue arrow on a 3-of-a-kind and just sending 2 blue arrows at your opponent. Not where you want to be, and Evan saying, you know what, I'm not getting another activation of the Tunic this game. Your drill shot is threatening my armor. Let me just get use of it right now and really threaten you while you're at 8.
Evan with a 3-of-a-kind of his own to come back with 3 more cards heading into the hand tier. Card in the arsenal, no Voltaire activation, no Lexi flip yet. Michael Hamilton sitting at a very precarious 8. Evan Herndon at 15, time to flip up a blue infecting shot of his own from what I can tell. This is going to have to be some blocking from Michael Hamilton here. It's going to be coming down to a matter of who blocks when and who blocks correctly.
And Evan critically really needed to find a blue of the 3-of-a-kind because if you notice what he pitched on the 3-of-a-kind, he pitched a red Icequake, really fishing for the blue, really fishing for arrows to send, and him, unlike Michael Hamilton, didn't break on drawing 2 non-arrows. He drew the blue and he drew some red arrows. It's a red searing shot coming in. Now that on hit when the opponent's at 8 is very threatening. This is effectively, if the breakpoint isn't covered up, effectively a 0 for 5. Now, Michael Hamilton does have the 1 block on the Perch Grapplers, got the -1 from a drill shot earlier, but that critically can help stop this 4-power breakpoint.
Absolutely. Now, here we go. This arrow's coming in with go again, going an attempt to give another life to the cause here. Searing shot, so much damage. Michael Hamilton has to decide when and how he wants to block. Gonna go ahead and check the graveyard here. This has been cool, man.
So at this point, as the opposing Lexi, you have to decide which on-hit you are letting through. So there's 1 on the combat chain right now, there's 1 infecting shot in the arsenal, 1 unknown arrow in hand. So Michael Hamilton's trying to decide what could be the most threatening on-hit that you send, that unknown arrow that you are hiding from me. And typically Lexi, they'll want to send a more threatening arrow second, hide information as long as they can. So he knows some threatening on-hit is being preserved over here on Evan's side. So he's checking through a graveyard, seeing what it could be to try and decide which on-hit he needs to let through. This is a very critical decision for him. He needs to let the less threatening on-hit through, and that might very well be the searing shot, only representing 1 extra damage on the on-hit, as opposed to the Remorseless that's in Evan Holden's hand, which could represent an extra 2 to 3 points of damage.
Absolutely. So this Perch Grappler is going to be donated to this block here with the 3 block, wanting to make sure we can spend the resources the way we want. Michael Hamilton deciding, going to block all the way out for 4, but now here's that Remorseless. This one's coming in for 5. This is not only damage, but this threatens damage on Michael Hamilton's own turn. These Remorselesses, I feel like, have been massive for Evan in this game.
Absolutely, and Michael Hamilton definitely not happy to see Remorseless. We talked about the on-hits that he needs to decide, this is the on-hit I'm letting through. This is not the on-hit he wanted to let through. Had he known Remorseless coming through, I'm sure we would have seen the searing shot, that on-hit being let through, but Michael Hamilton getting a little punished here. Obviously, he looked through a graveyard, there's a Remorseless right there in the graveyard, saying it's unlikely that you have another one in your hand, but there we go. Evan drawing that off of 3-of-a-kind in a very timely manner.
Talked about a tale of 2 halves of this game. This could also be a tale of 2 3-of-a-kinds. 3-of-a-kind drawing 2 non-arrows and the Quiver of Rustling Leaves being activated into a blue drill shot, whereas for Evan, look at the gas that the 3-of-a-kind presented to him. It gave him the blue that he needed to power up the turn, the searing shot, the Remorseless. Very different uses of the card, and just very different tops of the deck for these 2 players.
And as we talk about power cards as well, Rain Razors, very powerful card in the Lexi mirror, but with Michael Hamilton at 8, holding on to a Rain Razors, forced to eat this blue infecting shot, not where he wants to be. This is effectively an extra 5 damage presented from that blue, because that's a Rain... well, I mean, he has Tunic up, so he can activate Tunic and pitch that Rain Razors to at least turn that into preventing 2 damage, as opposed to a no block that he'll just be stuck with. And when you're at 5, Rain Razors, you need a big hand for it. Unlikely Alexi opponent's going to let you keep a big hand for that, so we might see him do that play, or maybe he wants to be more aggressive. Maybe he's saying, if I keep blocking, there's no way I win. That would be playing to not lose rather than playing to win. So we might see him maybe use that face down arrow. I believe that's a face down arrow in his arsenal. Maybe he's going to use that with the Rain Razors. Let's see
Yeah,
what
I
he
think
likes to do.
that's a very interesting point there, Ponkage. Michael Hamilton sitting below Evan to the tune of 10 life, 5 life for him, and it looks like we're just going to activate the quiver here just to get the Rain Razors. No, yes, to get the
Very nice.
pitch into the pitch zone because the Codex of Frailty, if you play it, you're going to have to discard the Rain Razors anyway. So by activating the Voltaire, not putting anything in, we're able to get a card from our graveyard. And like you talked about, once the Command and Conquer hits the graveyard, we have the Tunic up and ready to throw a Command and Conquer. Again, this might just be damage, utilizing the Premeditate as well.
This could be a CNC for 9 on a Codex then when Evan didn't have an arsenal, which means he is forced to take a card from his graveyard into an arsenal. So this CNC, not just vanilla damage, as it potentially might have looked like, Evan needs to put something in his arsenal and discard a card. So this Premeditate would be threatening the extra Ponder, maybe not needed because he already did the Codex, but CNC for 9. This could be that pivot. Now, however, we do need to accept that Michael Hamilton is choosing to eat 2 damage from the Blood Rot to make this play. So
Yeah.
while the life total says he's at 5, he's actually virtually at 3. So we have to wonder, is Evan just going to say, all right, you know what, I might just take this 9, lose the arsenal, and keep threatening you while you're at 3? He's saying no. Did you manage to catch which arrow he took?
He took a Searing Shot.
Took a Searing Shot. But with the Frailty, though, that Searing Shot's only going to come in for 3. It will threaten lethal. It will force a card out of Michael Hamilton's hand, but just 1 card. This is the way Michael Hamilton has shifted tempo back to his side. And yeah, we talked about the CNC in the graveyard, very, very critical for moments like this.
Now, a magnificent play there from the world champ, putting that Codex of Frailty into the pitch zone, so he had enough to play the Command and Conquer after that Codex, and now has really put himself in a position. Evan Herndon only able to throw the 1 arrow that can be covered up by the 1/3 block from Michael Hamilton's hand, and then is going to be off an arsenal. So has to play off of those 4 cards, does not have anything left over, will Evan Herndon, and so then Michael Hamilton's going to have all the tempo, whatever he drew off of the Ponder there, and then whatever's left in the hand. If the turnaround happens, this will be the play that we keep coming back to. What a move there from the world champ to give himself a fighting chance here in the quarterfinals of the national championship.
Definitely, and I didn't manage to catch what he drew off the Ponder. He very quickly put that in the arsenal, so we're not sure what that is. If that is another one of those critical power cards, like maybe another Codex, another Rain Razors, we could see Michael Hamilton definitely really claw back into the game. Now, we do need to point out the life total disparity. Evan Herndon at 15 does have a life total to work with. If Michael Hamilton isn't able to cobble together enough damage, Evan might just say, all right, send me the bill. I'm going to go down to maybe even 1, but I will be sending arrow after you. And because you are at 3, you don't have the luxury that I do of being able to play with your life total.
So we've got potentially a bunch of reds in the hand here from Michael Hamilton, if I'm not mistaken, because this is a Heat Seeker that we have to just fire off. Let's see if it has the go again. We're going to see when the damage is represented. Yeah, this is 5 with go again. An important on hit, but here, how much life does Evan have to work with, and how much damage is he going to be able to throw? All of this damage is going to be taken. Evan heading on down to 6 here because, I was excited about the fact that there was no arsenal in terms of a potential comeback, but with Michael Hamilton at 3 and Lexi Livewire having 4 cards to work with, a lot of blocking is about to happen.
That is definitely not what Michael Hamilton wanted. When you send your first arrow, you really want to be able to hide some of what you're up to for the rest of the turn. But Michael Hamilton, because of those 4 reds, was forced to play face up. He was forced to flip with Lexi, forced to pitch a red into the Voltaire, and then pitch a red again to Heatseeker. So Evan Herndon knew exactly how much damage was coming in, and as we talked about, he said, I'm going to use my life total now. Like, I have accumulated a life lead. I'm going to use my life total. I'm going to let you get a Heatseeker on here. It doesn't matter because you're going to have to give me a lot of cards. Yeah, I'm starting with an Icequake into another 3 of a kind. Now let's see what he drew from the 3 of a kind.
So here is a Heat Seeker for 8. This is going to go ahead and threaten not only the Heat Seeker effect of putting a card into the arsenal at the beginning of the end phase face up, also a Frostbite for the remainder of the turn, but honestly, most importantly here, this is just 8 damage. Evan Herndon smelling blood in the water, seeing the world champ on the ropes, and coming in potentially to try to finish the job.
And Michael Hamilton drew into a 3 of a kind. Now that is one of those cards that you can potentially pivot off of. You can commit some cards to blocking and then you just keep 2 cards to do 3 of a kind. But when you're at 3, it seems like he might need to put a 3 of a kind on the combat chain as a blocking card, and that could very well be the beginning of doom for him.
8 damage coming across. Evan Herndon sitting at 6, took 2 cards worth of damage, gave Michael Hamilton the Heat Seeker trigger to grab that Searing Shot and throw it in the arsenal, but it was to do this, an Ice Quake into a 3-of-a-kind, and had the resources to play these cards. The Codex there powering up this turn. Once again, the blue was drawn for Evan. So as he said, the ratios might not have been exactly where he wanted them for maximum consistency, but that's the thing with Lexi. You don't have to necessarily always have the perfect ratios, because sometimes the deck will help you out and give it to you in the order you need, and then the cards are just so powerful.
Exactly. Michael Hamilton with the 2 extra blues in his deck, but he was the one who had the 4 red hand just now with the Heat
and
Seeker.
That blue off the top with the drill shot. I mean, you got a couple extra blues.
That
Sometimes
is true.
the blues don't always have the power that the reds do.
Exactly. Now, to Evan's, I guess, displeasure somewhat, Michael Hamilton did get a very good hit off that Heat Seeker. That Searing Shot that he put there, that is a 1-card 5. Evan is at 6, so that is still something he might be able to eat. But if Michael Hamilton survives this turn, he will be able to send that 0 for 5, effectively put Evan at the very critical 1 if Evan chooses not to block. And that could be one way Michael Hamilton gets out of this bit of a pickle that he's in. But first, he's going to need to decide how he's dealing with this 8-power Heat Seeker plus a follow-up arrow that Evan very, very likely would have drawn from the 3-of-a-kind.
Coming down to the wire here, folks. We've got a couple pieces of equipment left for Michael Hamilton. 2 block on the New Horizon if he ever finds himself off of an arsenal and has the opportunity to use it, get its life value while you might not need 2 arsenals at this late point in the game. Does also have the Tunic. Unfortunately for him, the Tunic only at 1, meaning he's not going to be able to Tunic into a 3-of-a-kind, and just has to commit 2 6 blocks, or 2 3 blocks and the 2 block to get it up to 8, cover the damage entirely. But now, oh my goodness, this is a Bolton Shot for 5. This
and it is a red as well.
This can only be covered up by giving the New Horizon. Looks like the answer is no. We're going to go ahead and take the 2, go to 1, reload. This is an endless arrow. There's no cards left in hand, and that's going to be the game, folks. Evan Herndon taking down the world champ. That's that.